All right, so for today's workout, we're gonna kick things off with mobility first. Anytime I'm doing hypertrophy work, I really want to focus on working through the greatest range of motion possible, and that's why I think it's so important to make sure that before the workout even starts, I'm doing a little bit of work to open up a little bit, especially my hips, pecs, shoulders, lats, all that good stuff. So we'll do some foam rolling, and then we'll get into a Matt Wenning style warm-up. Matt Wenning is a multiple-time world record holder in powerlifting. He's like one of the best minds when it comes to strength development. And he has a specific style of warm-up that can help you not only stimulate a little bit more muscle growth, improve your general physical preparedness, but also this is a great way to sneak in a little extra training volume, and you can kind of build it around some weak points in your physique or weak points in your athleticism. So we're gonna do a Matt Wenning style warm-up, and then we have, actually let me pull it up here. We have a few different supersets that we're gonna hit. The first one is gonna be pec flies and ATG split squats. Then we got dumbbell pullovers, which is a classic old school bodybuilding exercise. And then we're gonna superset the pullovers with the Copenhagen lift to work on our adductors. Then we're gonna hit shoulders with the ATG dumbbell lat raise and the long lunge step. The long lunge steps, I freaking love those. You guys hopefully will like them too. And then we got some arms to close it out with incline dumbbell curls and rope push downs. So let's get started on the mobility work, and then we'll hit that Matt Wenning style warm up. I was going through the explanation of the mobility work, and then my camera crashed and we lost all the footage for the mobility. So if you want to go through the mobility work before you run through this workout, because we're going to be doing some big range of motion movements for our chest and shoulders, for our lats and our hips, it's really important that you work on mobility of all three of those areas. So I did a 90-90 hip drill adductor smash on the foam roller, just rolling out kind of the inside meaty part of my legs. I did a foam roll lat smash, trying to work on my overhead mobility a little bit. And then I also grabbed a barbell and did the barbell pec smash, which felt amazing. And sometimes when I do big range of motion chest movements, sometimes I feel a little tension in my biceps, especially after a day of Jiu Jitsu where like I was doing a ton of squeezing, which would be today. I trained Jiu Jitsu last night and I was squeezing a lot. And so I also rolled out my biceps on the barbell. Now that we took care of that, the way this warm-up is gonna be structured is we're gonna do dumbbell overhead press, 3 sets of 25 reps. We're gonna do any sort of seated row variation, which they have a prime seated row machine over here, or chest supported row in the Power Project gym, which is freaking sick. So shout out to Mark Bell. Thanks for letting me use your facility. And then we're also gonna do ATG split squats and Cossack squats, which is something I pretty much put in every single workout. So we cover the full body. The way it's structured is that even though we're doing 3 sets of 25 on the military press and on the seated row machine, or the chest supported row machine, it's still a warm-up. So we're doing 3 sets of 25 reps, and the reps should be light, but they should be difficult enough to where you feel like those last like 3 to 5 reps, you feel a little bit of a burn. If you feel like you have to lock in and grind through the last few reps, for this warm-up, you're going way too heavy and way too hard. This is just a warm-up. We want to finish the warm-up in about 5-10 minutes tops, and we want to feel like we got our heart rate up and we have a pretty good pump going into the first official superset of this workout. All right, here we go. 25 reps. Warming up.
Sometimes I even stop the smoking when it's time to fall. My name, Dior, my pen, below, create, explore, expand, concord.
With these warm-up exercises, I like to try to get into a little bit more range of motion with every rep. So as I start feeling a little bit more warm, feeling a little bit more ready for the workout, I'll start letting things stretch out just a little bit more. Try to get a little bit harder contraction at the end, a little bit more of a stretch, followed by a hard contraction. 3, 4, 5. These prime machines, they're the best machines I've ever used. Based on where you put the weight, let's see, So you see we got a few different settings here. Based on where you load the weight, you can emphasize different parts of the movement. And they have the little guide right here. So in the middle, it's the middle range, I guess that makes sense. Bottom is the end, and then the top emphasizes a little bit more stress or a little bit more resistance at the beginning. So we're doing a little bit of a combo. Most of the resistance is gonna come on at the beginning, or at our greatest point of leverage, then making it a little bit tough in the middle, and then it's going to be a little bit easier as we kind of get to the hardest position, which is pulling all the way back at the end of the range of motion. 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. First superset of this workout is going to be dumbbell chest flies. Really, it could be any chest fly variation you want. So if you want to use cables, you can use cables. If you have a chest fly machine, you can use a machine. We got cables here and dumbbells, but it's been a long time since I've specifically done dumbbell chest flies, so I'll be working with those today. 4 sets of 10. Then we're going to superset that with a coiling ATG split squats, and I'll show you guys what that is in a second. And you can use just your body weight for this. If you have the mobility to get work through the biggest range of motion possible, and it doesn't feel as challenging or difficult, then you can add a little bit of weight. But I think the last time I did these, the most weight I used was like 10 pounds. So you really don't need a whole lot. And this is how I like to pair the hypertrophy with the mobility work. So obviously the dumbbell chest fly can be great for a hypertrophy stimulus, but it can also be a great mobility stimulus because you're really working through a big range of motion, getting a big stretch in the pecs and the front of the shoulder. And then we're gonna pair that with a lower body exercise that also heavily emphasizes mobility and increasing the range of motion that we can work through and building strength at those end ranges. When it comes to being able to decrease the risk of injury in Jiu Jitsu, it's not just about getting stronger, it's not just about quote unquote stretching for the sake of stretching. It's really about building strength in those end ranges. And so doing something like dumbbell chest flies can be a great option for the shoulders and the pecs. Doing something like the coiling ATG split squat, and if you add a little bit of weight, it can also be great for opening up your hips, improving mobility in your ankles and your knees, and things like that. So that's superset number 1, 4 sets of 10 on the flies, 4 sets of 6 on each side of the split squat. Yeah. All right, here we go. When doing dumbbell chest flies, I personally like to take a ton of warm-up sets. Well, maybe not a ton, maybe just 2 or 3. Instead of just doing one half set and then grabbing a working weight, usually do 2 or 3 full warm-up sets because I want to really kind of mentally get used to that bottom position right here and get a good feel for it, and then really focus on being able to squeeze as hard as I can to the top. That's something that with dumbbells, I find that I used to do this and I've seen other people do it too, where they kind of get most of the work here at the bottom and then they come up and then they just get kind of lazy. They don't really focus on getting the most out of the rep by pinching the dumbbells together and flexing their pecs as hard as they can. And the other thing too I found is that I used to bring my hands straight out this way, and that would always just freaking wreck my shoulders. It never felt great. So, and pumping iron, and in Arnold's Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding talks about how it kind of brings them down at an angle, not exactly 45 degrees, but something between, like right by your side and perfectly at 90 degrees, somewhere in the middle that feels good, where you put a lot of tension on the pecs, can get a big stretch at the bottom, but you can still kind of engage a lot of your pecs to come up and squeeze together at the top. Obviously, you're gonna hit a little bit of your front delt too, but you wanna find something that feels great on your shoulders and allows you to work through the greatest range of motion possible. All right, here we go. Working set number 1. 10 reps. All right. Hey. Oh. X. A. One more. Woo. That felt amazing. Tough stretch, but felt good. All right, set number 2. Yep. One thing as important to remember on those, and something I think about as the fatigue increases, especially as like you go from one set to the next and trying to find like the right weight, is I try to think about, and I think I mentioned this when I was doing the push-ups in the last workout, was trying to find the sweet spot of, okay, I want to be able to work through the largest range of motion possible, but if you're doing the bodyweight exercise, you want to work through the largest range of motion possible, but you don't want to shorten the range of motion necessarily just to get more reps, where you don't match the intention of the set. And so the intention for this is to get a great stretch at the bottom, and even if the weight feels like you could maybe go a little bit heavier, but it would cost you at how deep of a stretch you could get, in my opinion, it's better to just stick with the original intention of the workout, which is to work through the largest range of motion possible and use a lighter weight. And maybe if you're kind of in that weird spot where moving up in weight doesn't allow you to work through the greatest range of motion possible, but the next weight down doesn't feel as challenging, it's totally okay to just either add a couple reps or maybe slow it down a little bit or add a pause at the bottom. Try to find a way to make the set more difficult, or make whatever weight you're using more difficult. And that's something that I think that comes with experience in the gym. After a while, you really figure out how to get whatever stimulus you need out of whatever weight you have access to, or whatever weight is in your hand. So you can make a 20-pound dumbbell feel really, really heavy if you know what you're doing. Or you don't always have to load up just stack and stack and stack more and more weight. if you go into the workout with the right intention, you can find ways to just use whatever weight you have and make it match the intensity, make it match how heavy you want it to feel. And sometimes that means either slowing it down or adding a pause at the bottom, doing these little things that can help with making the set a little bit more difficult so you can still get a great training stimulus out of that set. So on these coiling ATG split squats, I'm a big fan of all the stuff that Alex Kanellis is doing with Landmine University, all the stuff that David Weck is doing with Weck Method. And one thing that they talk about is the concept of your spinal engine, and that all movement is kind of generated from the spine. And I'm still learning about it, so don't quote me on that and don't expect me to have a doctorate in the spinal engine. But one thing I have found that has had good transfer and carryover to all the grappling training that I do is trying to find movements where I think they call it coiling. So you're like making one side really short and extending the other side as far as you can. And when you look at all sorts of different athletic movements, you end up seeing this common trend of this coiling position in a lot of different areas. And so I've been playing around with just taking like a regular exercise that I was doing before or something I've been doing as part of my regular workout and seeing if I can add like a coiling aspect to it. So a traditional ATG split squat from Ben Patrick is like you kind of take like a long staggered stance, and then you really focus on driving that knee as far forward as you can over your toe. So you're getting a great stretch on the hip on one side. I don't think you guys can see since my leg is blocking it. And you also get a good stretch in the quad, good stretch in the calf and the ankle. And you work back, and so you're able to kind of work through a pretty large range of motion, work on ankle mobility, knee, hip mobility, all that stuff. I'll show you on the other side. And so what I've been doing is kind of taking that movement and seeing if I could add a coil to it to get a little bit more of that spinal engine work. And I find it beneficial. I find it helpful. You can play around with it. If you think it doesn't do anything, then that's totally fine too. But instead of just coming down and stopping right here and keeping like my chest facing forward and neutral, what I've been doing is I've been trying to crunch to the forward leg and then really open up as much as possible on the back leg. So I'm kind of like tilting a little bit as I drive that knee forward, and I'm really coiling tight on one side and getting as lengthened as possible on the other side. And I'll hold that for a second and then drive myself backwards. And on the other side, looks like this. So I'm still doing the ATG split squat where I'm driving my knee forward, but as I get deeper and deeper, I'm also crunching and coiling harder and harder as I get to the bottom. So I start kind of like a neutral spine position, start moving forward, crunching, and coiling as much as possible, really trying to open up as much as I can on that extended side. Try to get I think they talk about like getting your elbow to your back pocket, really crunching down as much as you can, and then driving back. And so if you can do that and work through a full range of motion, just with your body weight, doing that version of the exercise, that's great. Might be ready to add a little bit of load. And so I've been doing that for a while, so I'm ready to move up to 10 pounds. And all I do when doing it this way is I just hold it on my chest, almost like the same way you would hold a landmine. If you're familiar with Landmine University, you hold it at your chest and you do some of these different coiling positions. And so I hold the dumbbell the same way. I hold it by my chest, and then as I start driving my knee forward, I start crunching and coiling down on that side. The weight doesn't necessarily make it harder. Like it doesn't feel like you're lifting, but the little extra weight does help you kind of sink in to the bottom a little bit more. And then you drive yourself back. Ooh. Hey. Oh. Almost lost my balance there. 5, one more on this side. I will say, after I started using more of these coiling exercises and some of the spinal engine stuff, a lot of the stiffness in my lower back that I was feeling just from lifting and wrestling and doing jiu-jitsu, a lot of that really started to go away. Not that the spinal engine does anything magical for your low back, but you're just improving the way your spine moves. And if you can improve the way a certain section of your body is able to move, that can often help relieve some of the stiffness and tightness that's in there. So same thing with the shoulders. If your shoulder doesn't move very well, it's just kind of stuck in this very limited range of motion, it makes sense that that could lead to some sort of shoulder pain or shoulder issues. Not all the time, but it can. And so if you improve the mobility and the movement quality of your shoulder, oftentimes can help with decreasing the pain that you're experiencing. So I've noticed something about that with the spinal engine and these coiling movements and it having helped decrease the low back pain that I was experiencing. Here we go. 1. Ooh. 3. 4. 5. 6. All right. I gotta say something about this song. I think this song is freaking awesome. And I think it's one of Nirvana's best. And I thought it was so dope how in the Batman they used Something in the Way as like a theme for the movie. And I hope that in the Batman 2, which comes out, I think in 2026 or end of 2025, I don't know. I hope they do a rendition of this song. How sick would that be? Because then in the first one, Batman, he had to have like a little bit of a change in his identity, going from being vengeance to then being hope. And the song, Come As You Are, maybe that there's like a double meaning to that, where Bruce Wayne needs to come out to the public as Bruce Wayne to do more to help Gotham City, as opposed to just being the recluse as Batman. And I think the messaging of the song and kind of what it represents can kind of play on that dichotomy. Like, is Bruce Wayne dressing up and pretending to be Batman, or is Batman the real identity and Bruce Wayne is just a mask? And in my opinion, I feel like Batman is the real identity and Bruce Wayne is just a mask. So those are my thoughts. Enough comic book talk. We got another set to do. Here we go. Last set, best set. Shout out to all the Lil Wayne mixtapes. Oh. 6, 7, 8, 9, and one more. A little extra for good measure. One thing that I have liked a lot about I did one bodybuilding show, but I've been doing bodybuilding training for a long time. And one thing that I've noticed is that so many like old school, there's a debate on whether or not they're even that old school, but just old and more traditional bodybuilding training exercises and principles have so much benefit for developing athleticism. And I know it sounds crazy, like, oh, bodybuilders aren't athletic, why would you want to train like them? And it's not like, yeah, if you tried to get ready for a bodybuilding show, your athleticism is probably going to be completely tanked. But you can still pull different principles from bodybuilding and modify them a little bit, so that way it can help with your overall athletic development. And I think a lot of times some of these exercises where old school bodybuilders would focus on getting a huge stretch at the bottom and working through a big range of motion. Like, you look at pumping iron, you read some of Arnold's Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding, you look at the old Frank Zane articles and books, Tom Platz, all those guys talked about the importance of feeling that big stretch at the bottom and working through a large range of motion. And there's a lot of stuff nowadays where, like, the debate on whether or not lengthened partials are better for hypertrophy, and is the stretch the only thing that matters when it comes to building muscle? And I don't know enough of the science to like really debate on that. But I will say, in my own experience and in my experience coaching athletes, working through a larger range of motion, feeling a decent amount of stretch at the bottom position and flexing really hard, like as hard as you possibly can at the top position, often leads to great hypertrophy results, as well as just building strength at some of those end ranges. Like you think about when people mess their pec up at Jiu Jitsu, or especially their bicep, it doesn't usually happen right here when everything's like crunched in and they're holding position here. It's oftentimes they get extended out on an arm bar, and that's when they tear their bicep. Or they try a hitchhiker escape and someone bridges into their shoulder, they tear part of their pec, or they jack their shoulder up. It's not when everything's crunched in and close, shortened range of motion here. It's when things are opened up and extended that people really start to get injured if they haven't built strength in those extended or end ranges of motion. And so doing exercises like the dumbbell chest fly, yeah, it's great to build up your chest and get freaking jacked, but it's also massively beneficial for just decreasing risk of injury. And that's often why I try to include in almost every training program that I create for the athletes I coach, or even on the strength matrix, there's usually almost always some form of traditional bodybuilding sprinkled in there somewhere, where we're really working through a big range of motion and building strength at some of those end ranges. I found that to be like one of the best things that can help, not just with stimulating muscle growth, but just with decreasing risk of injury as a grappler. That completed our first superset. Now, second superset is going to be 4 sets of 10 dumbbell pullover, superset with 4 sets of 6 on the Copenhagen lift. I'll talk about the Copenhagen lift in a second, but at least for the dumbbell pullover, I want to make sure that when you're doing this exercise, you're really opening up your lats and feeling the tension all in your lats, all on the muscles, kind of in your intercostals surrounding your ribs, and feeling that loaded stretch in there. If you start just dropping the dumbbell behind your head and you feel it mainly in your triceps, you're not really getting much out of the exercise, at least when it comes to building up your lats, improving your overhead mobility, thoracic extension, and all that stuff. So usually I just keep the dumbbell on the bench and get it set here. And with these, I don't start my first rep until I feel like I found a good groove. So sometimes I might lower it behind. It's like, okay, that felt all right. Lower it a little bit deeper. Maybe I need to adjust myself a little bit. Oh, that was it. So now I know exactly what spot I'm aiming for on every rep, and I can start my 10 working reps. Oh. 8. 4. 5. 6. 8. 9. Oh. Whoo. That's a good one. Set number 2. Up. Oh. 3. 4. 5. 6. 7. 8. One more. Oh. Whew. I mentioned earlier in the workout, you can learn how to make a certain weight feel heavier, and the better you get, or maybe not better, but at least the more experienced you get with training in the gym, you could take whatever weight you have and make it as difficult as you need to for that set and what the training intention is. And when I was selecting weight for this workout, I was thinking like, oh man, it's been a long time since I've done heavy dumbbell pullovers. I think the last time I did it, I did like a 70 or an 80 pound dumbbell. And I didn't do it for sets of 10. So I grabbed a 50 and I was like, dang, it actually feels like kind of heavy. I could do like shorter reps, like if I was just trying to load it up and get as strong as possible in a shorter range of motion, but that's not necessarily the goal for this workout. So I lowered the weight, went to 40, and on that last set, I was really trying to find like, okay, I'm gonna keep letting it lower, 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 and I wanna feel as much of that tension as possible. Even though it's technically a lighter weight than the 50 pound dumbbell that I grabbed earlier, I can get a little bit more out of the set because I'm able to work through a little bit greater range of motion, feel the tension a little bit more, and still get a really good training stimulus. And there's definitely like a fine line to play with that, because there are some people that don't lift heavy at all, and they're like, I just feel the tension, and it's only about mind muscle connection. And that, I get where they're coming from, but sometimes at the end of the day, like, you do gotta freaking load it up and start moving some weight. So, but that's not necessarily the goal for this workout. The goal for this workout is to get a really good training stimulus, work through a large range of motion, feel that loaded stretch on most of these movements. We got a lot of loaded stretch movements in this workout. And then each week, I mean, this is only week 1, so starting at 40, next week the goal would be to hit 45, maybe a set or 2 at 50, and then maybe in week 3, which would be the last week of doing this exercise, I hit something a little bit heavier, I hit closer to, say, 60, or maybe I do end up going back to that 70-pound dumbbell. We'll see. So it's kind of like Jiu Jitsu in the sense where the more experienced you get in Jiu Jitsu, you can do more with less, per se. Like, even in something as simple as it's not even a technique. It's more like you just know what to do. I noticed this yesterday. We were doing some constraint-based games from knee shield and passing half guard, and there are certain things I felt like I was able to pick up on and do that aren't necessarily moves, like just where I put my weight on my opponent or how I make them carry my weight. I feel like as I've been training longer and longer, I start to pick up on those little things. I didn't learn a new move called, apply the quote-unquote apply pressure move, but you do just kind of intuitively pick up on some of those things. And I feel like strength training is the same way, and they're very similar in that you haven't really done a new exercise, you're not necessarily using a ton more weight, but you picked up something new on how to get a little bit more out of that exercise. You didn't necessarily learn a new jiu-jitsu technique, but maybe you picked up something new on how to apply a pressure and put a little bit more load on the person underneath you as you're trying to pass their guard, or whatever the case may be. A lot of that comes with experience and intentionality in all of your training sessions. The other part of the superset is going to be a Copenhagen plank or a Copenhagen lift, depending on how strong you are. So the Copenhagen plank is you just put your foot on a bench or something like that. It could be a box or this giant ass tire. But you just put your foot on something, and you're gonna use all the muscles on the inside of your thigh to lift yourself up. So you got like your adductor, you do have a little bit of your hamstring, got a little bit of your hip flexors in there as well. And if you're doing the plank version, then you're just gonna come up and hold for 15 seconds. If you really struggle with only putting your foot on the bench or whatever you're using and being able to hold yourself up, you can scale it by just putting more of your leg on whatever you're doing. So the more leg you have on the box or the bench, whatever, the easier it is. It gets more difficult as you start bringing yourself out farther and farther. So if you've never done this before, do the plank version and figure out what feels best for you. If you can do the plank version for, say, like 30 seconds on each side, no problem, then go ahead and do the lift. The lift makes it a little bit more difficult because you're not starting in the upright or in the top position. You have to lift yourself up there, and so you kind of have to go from this extended position and lift yourself up to the top position and then lower yourself down. You can kind of cheat by using this other foot as a balance to help you get up. So what I like to do is I like to really make sure I get this foot off the floor. I want to make sure I start lifting up, and I want to squeeze my glutes as hard as I can at the top to really make sure I'm getting everything in my lower body firing hard. Ooh. 3, 4, 5, X. Do 6 on the other side. 8, 4, 5, X. Whew. That exercise is fantastic for grapplers. Really any athlete, but in grappling there, I mean, there's so much stuff where you do have to pinch your knees together to control your opponent or to hold position or put the finishing touches on a submission, whatever you're doing. And so doing something like that is amazing for really strengthening the adductors and the muscles of your groin. And then as you start to improve your mobility, it's also important that you build stability in those end ranges. Again, that's like been the whole theme of today's workout. So as you get better and better at this, you can start lifting the point at which you start the movement. So you have to go from like a static and relaxed position to then being able to flex everything, boom, and lift yourself up, which that is a huge part of jiu-jitsu, being relaxed in some positions and then being able to flex everything and start moving to do whatever you need to do, whether you're looking to arm drag somebody or whether you're looking to throw up a triangle or whatever move of choice you're trying to do in jiu-jitsu. So Copenhagen planks, fantastic exercise. I would go as far to say for grapplers, that's like an S tier exercise. I have every single athlete, every single grappling athlete I think I've ever worked with, I've had them do some version of Copenhagen planks to help strengthen their groin muscles and their adductors. And even the few athletes that I worked with who weren't grapplers, I'm pretty sure I still had them do Copenhagen planks too. It's just that great of an exercise. Halfway through the workout, 2 more big supersets to go. This next one is gonna be the ATG dumbbell lat raise, which is, I think some people also call it a Polakun shoulder raise, or anyways, doesn't matter. And then we're gonna superset that with the long lunge step. And then we get to my favorite part of the workout, which is to finish with some arms, and then we're heading out and going home. So it's gonna be 4 sets of 10 on the ATG dumbbell lat raise, 4 sets of 6 on each side for the long lunge step. In case you haven't noticed, there's a little bit of a theme with how we're running the sets and reps for today's workout. Oh. 3, 4, 5, X, 8, 9, 10. Shh. 3, 4, 5, X, 7, 8. 2 more. For these long lunge steps, I don't know how I'm gonna show you guys this because they're pretty long, but maybe you guys can see if I just set you up right here. Let's see how this goes. All right, that'll have to do. All right, so for these long lunge steps, as awesome as knees over toes guy is, this is like the opposite of that. We want to keep our knee behind our toe as much as possible. So I'm taking a big step forward, like as big of a step as I can. And I really do want my knee to be all the way behind my ankle because I want to get a good stretch on the hip, of course, but I really want to engage a lot of my hamstring to pull myself forward. Think about in jiu-jitsu when you're in a lot of these positions, whether you're in guard or whatever, and you have to reach out with your leg and catch on their leg or their hip, and you are pulling oftentimes with your hamstring to get into position or pulling to collect whatever you're looking to do. So doing some exercises where we really emphasize on pulling with the hamstring, I think can have a great transfer and carryover to jiu-jitsu. A lot of times I'll step out, get a real deep lunge step, and then pull with the hamstring on that side. We'll do 6 reps on each side. Usually your stride is so long that usually I just walk down from one end of the gym to the other until I have 6 reps on both sides. At 4th and final superset, we got incline dumbbell curls. And then we're gonna superset that with rope extensions. 4 sets, 10 reps on both. Both of these exercises, I'll show you guys something you can do to get a little bit greater range of motion. Not necessarily that every single exercise has to have a perfect transfer and carryover to jiu-jitsu. Sometimes it's just fun to get jacked. But I do think it is important to understand some of the benefits that some of these changes can make in helping you be better physically prepared for jiu-jitsu. That's what it's all about, right? Being able to lift heavy and roll hard. And if how you're lifting heavy doesn't adequately prepare you to roll hard, that's a problem. So first movement is going to be the incline dumbbell curl. There's no like perfect incline that you need to set it at, but just know that the closer you get to horizontal, the more of a stretch on the bicep and the shoulder you're going to feel. So if you're really, really tight, I would do like a really like a pretty high incline. So that way there's not that much of a stretch. And then as you start to warm up and feel a little bit more comfortable, you can lower the bench more and more. For me, this feels pretty good for right now, but I might lower it in a couple sets. But you really want to make sure that you're letting your upper back get on the bench. You don't want to be crunched forward this whole time, because then you're basically just doing a regular dumbbell curl. You want to let your upper back really get glued to the bench, and then think about letting the weight almost roll your shoulders back a little bit. That way you can open up your chest, and that's going to be your good start position. And then from there, you do your regular curl, and you come down and really try to think about keeping your elbows behind the bench as much as you can. Empty the clip and roll the window up. Yes, sir. Shout out Lil Wayne. 7, 8, and one more big one. One more big one. Woo! Yes, sir. Solid first set. Now we'll hit rope extensions. On tricep pushdowns, I used to make a huge mistake, whether I was using the rope or whether I was using a handle, but I used to really lean over the handle and use some of my body weight to help me basically give me a little bit of a spot and a boost. And so I could do the whole stack just basically leaning over the top of it and doing a little bit of a tricep extension. And then I was hanging out with my guy, Jimmy House, a couple years ago, and he showed me something that completely changed the way I do tricep extensions. And he was saying that when you get set, you want to bring almost in the same way. You want to keep your elbows behind your body on that incline dumbbell curl. You want to keep your elbows behind your body for a little bit on the tricep pushdown. Because if you keep your elbows behind your body, you're able to work through a little bit greater range of motion. You get a little bit more stretch on the tricep. You can strengthen your triceps and the tissues around your elbow at that end, fully flexed position, which in jiu-jitsu, a lot of times guys, their elbows get so banged up because they're strong here from doing lots of bench press, lots of floor press. But the minute someone collapses their frames, they really start to get their elbows banged up because they haven't built strength in this fully flexed elbow position. And so you could use a rope push down, or even if you had a regular handle on the tricep push down, to help kind of get yourself a little bit stronger in some of those end ranges. And so what Jimmy was saying was, start with your elbows behind your body like this and allow the weight to basically just continue to pull your hands up towards your shoulders. Then from there, you do the extension part and flex from this position. Not right here where you're hanging your weight over the top, or hanging your own body weight over the top of the weight in the handles. You come here, and then you do your extension. And then you kind of let the weight kind of ride your hands up to your shoulders. Boom. And then flex again. And this completely changed the way I did tricep extensions, and they feel amazing. I don't know if you can see how much weight is on there, but it's definitely not the whole stack like what I used to do. And it just made me, doing it this way, made me realize, wow, my triceps are actually a lot weaker than I thought. And I was really creating just a lot of extra leverage for myself by leaning over the handle too much. Here we go, 2 more. And 10. Whew. Set 1 done, 3 more to go. Shh. Or 5. Whoops. Scooting the bench around. 7. 8. 9. 8. Kind of like how I mentioned, the tricep pushdown can be great for grapplers and improving their ability to handle some of the stress of their frames getting collapsed, especially when their elbow gets in that fully flexed position. The incline dumbbell curl is great for helping you build strength at that fully extended position of your elbow, especially like if you're escaping arm bars with a hitchhiker escape or some sort of turning arm bar escape. Your arm does have to extend a little bit for you to be able to do that. And if you haven't built strength, at least some strength in that extended position, if someone bridges at that point and you're tensed up and you haven't built strength, you do risk injuring yourself in that position. Not to say that like this will prevent injury. There's nothing that can prevent injury, but this can definitely decrease your risk of injury, especially building strength at those end ranges. And kind of like what I mentioned earlier, most injuries that happen in Jiu Jitsu don't happen when things are fully closed in and we're really, really strong as we keep things close to our body. We get weaker as things extend out from our body. So when people mess up their bicep or mess up their shoulder or mess up their pec in Jiu Jitsu, it's oftentimes because their arm gets fully extended and something pops in their bicep, or they feel a pop in their elbow, or something happens and they try a hitchhiker escape, someone bridges in to their shoulder and they pull something in their chest or pull something in their shoulder because they're fully extended. Same thing on the tricep. Sometimes tricep injuries happen, not when things are fully locked out here and you have strong frames. It's when your frames gets collapsed and your hand gets close to your shoulder and that tricep gets fully lengthened and extended, or the tricep gets lengthened, your elbow isn't extended. And that's oftentimes where a lot of injuries happen, just because you haven't built strength in some of those end ranges. And so these exercises, even though this workout is hypertrophy focused, and even though this workout it really is designed to stimulate muscle growth, we're also leaning heavy on building strength at some of those end ranges, so that way we can continue to lift heavy, we can continue to roll hard, and decrease our risk of injury. All right, here we go. Last set, best set. Oh. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's a wrap. All done with today's Jiu Jitsu hypertrophy workout. There's so much stuff, and I mean, I've been saying it the entire video, but there's so much stuff from bodybuilding that I've learned that I think has so much great benefit for grappling athletes. And I made a post last week or the week before about 3 lessons I've learned from bodybuilding. A huge one is just the mind-muscle connection and being intentional about really feeling the muscles that you're trying to improve upon or trying to get better, really feeling those working as you're going through the set, and being able to have better control over your body. So what it really means to like feel your rear delts flexing really hard versus your upper back. What it feels like to have your lats really pulling on some sort of row as opposed to just your biceps. Being able to have better control over your body, I found to be super helpful with just learning different jiu-jitsu techniques and kind of learning, quote unquote, the hidden details on how to finish like a guillotine as opposed to like just the steps of like lock your hands together and all that stuff. So mind muscle connection has been a huge benefit from bodybuilding and a huge lesson that I've learned. The second one is just dealing with the pump. Like in bodybuilding, a pump is a huge component of training and a huge driver of hypertrophy. And so being able to handle the pump sensation, be able to handle higher sensations of fatigue in the gym, I felt like does have a good carryover in being able to handle similar sensations of fatigue and that tight skin burning sensation you feel in your muscles when you're doing hard jiu-jitsu or hard wrestling training. That's been massively beneficial. And then even learning the poses in bodybuilding I found beneficial for grappling. Because when I was prepping for the bodybuilding show, you have to practice all the different poses and you got to work through and like hold all the different poses on stage. And sometimes you just have to hold them until they tell you to, face the curtain or face the judges again. And so building that muscular endurance to be able to hold those poses, building isometric strength and being able to flex really hard in those positions when you need to. And then also, again, just the mind-muscle connection of knowing how to hold a certain hold tension in a certain muscle for as long as you need to. I found that's been massively beneficial for jiu-jitsu, and being able to hold certain muscles, hold tension in certain muscles while you're holding a specific position. And as you're kind of thinking of what position you're going to move to next, or as someone is fighting to escape, you know exactly what muscles you need to maintain tension in to maintain control of your opponent. And so even though bodybuilding from jiu-jitsu people love to hate on bodybuilding, which I think is ridiculous, but there's so many benefits that bodybuilding training can have for grappling athletes. Again, that's not to say that every jiu-jitsu athlete needs to be a bodybuilder, but there are principles of training from bodybuilding that can be beneficial for grappling athletes. And I think that's massively beneficial. So hope you guys enjoyed this jiu-jitsu hypertrophy workout. Lift heavy, roll hard. Catch you guys later. Peace.